Have you ever heard of the white eyes theory? It is one of the oldest fan theories in Dead by Daylight, speculated as early as 2016, and unlike most of the theories that were wild back in the days, this one still holds to the present day, and it even makes more sense the more killers are added to the game, and the more we know about them. But what is the white eyes theory? Let me explain. When you select two killers at random, like the clown and huntress, it might seem like these two have absolutely nothing in common other than the fact that they are killers in Dead by Daylight. But by taking a look at one specific detail that these two share, you will see why I chose these two to compare. They share the exact same eyes, completely pitch black with no pupil visible, just like the hag. This is an intentional design choice made by the artists, because not all killers have pitch black eyes. In the case of Trapper, Plague, Trickster, and Legion, their eyes are untouched. Now, there is a third type of eyes in Dead by Daylight besides the normal eyes and the pitch black ones. These are the white eyes, or, as some people call them, the entity-touched eyes. And these white eyes are present in Wraith, Hillbilly, Doctor, Spirit, Deathslinger, and Twins design. But what is so special about them? If you have noticed, unlike Clown or Huntress, all the killers with white eyes feature something in common with the rest. That is, their willingness to kill before being taken by the entity. There was a very common misconception back when the game was still small, and that is that the killers are mindless toys that the entity uses in order to extract pain, suffering, and hope from the survivors in the trials. But this was proven wrong very fast by the developers. Trapper spikes in the design are not made to intimidate survivors into thinking that this is a monster that feels no pain. They were put there by the entity itself in order to torture and make Trapper submit to its will. This gave us a very important fact. The killers, even in the entity's realm, are still people with feelings and own desires. The entity cannot randomly take whoever it desires without first manipulating or torturing them into submission. This added a major layer of character depth to each of the killers in the game. Some of the killers, like Trickster, Ghostface, or Clown, needed no further manipulation or explanations. They accepted the deal to kill for the entity eternally. But some other killers make absolutely no sense as to why they would be torturing innocent survivors in the trials, and one of them was the Spirit. The Spirit was the first ever case of a killer that had committed no murders or participated into killing someone as a third party before being taken by the entity. In fact, she has never used a lethal weapon against anyone, and she was supposed to die by the hands of her father. So why would the Spirit end up killing Megs and Nias for all eternity? That is where the white eyes theory comes into place. The Spirit is based on an onryo, a Japanese ghost who are extremely filled with rage and the desire to take revenge on the people that wronged them in the past. Onryos are born when someone, mostly a woman, was wronged and killed, and they promise to take revenge on the person that did that to them. Spirit is exactly that. She promised to never let her father walk away freely after killing her mother. But the thing is, this supernatural deity that took her oath was none other than the entity. In fact, there is another theory that states that the entity was going after the father of the Spirit, but that extreme rage and desire for revenge of the Spirit moments after her death made the entity be very interested in her. After all, the entity feeds in emotions, whether negative or positive, and Spirit was a bombshell of emotions ready to burst. But this does not explain why a killer that wants to take revenge on her father would spend their time killing other survivors for no reason. Well, this is because the entity is manipulating the Spirit into thinking that the survivors are her father. All of the Spirit's perks are based on revenge. Haunted Grounds as revenge for breaking the totems, Spirit Fury as revenge for hurting the spirit with a pallet, and finally, Rancor, which is one of the perks that allows the killer to mori the obsession, and this is the best proof that Spirit sees the survivors as her dad, because her mori animation shows how she cuts the survivors with a katana and they are stabbed in similar parts of the torso as the Spirit based on her cuts, which would be the perfect revenge for Spirit. She wants to give her father the same fate that she was given. So in other words, the killers that feature white eyes are being manipulated by the entity to see something they desire to kill in order to make them serve. If the spirit was not enough to convince you of this theory, then let's take a look at what is by far the best evidence for this theory to be right: the Deathslinger. For me personally, the Deathslinger was the killer that solidified this theory as very plausible. Deathslinger was sadistic and far from being a good person, but when compared to the majority of the cast, it is clear that Deathslinger was at the very least lawful evil. He never hunted down innocent people, he only attacked criminals that had a bounty on it for the money. He used his sadistic but brilliant mind to invent things that were very advanced for the time period he was in, and one of those inventions is the Redeemer, which allowed him to bring criminals to justice alive. Of course, he did this for coin. The thing about Deathslinger was that, besides what you might think of him, he has no reason to go after the survivors in the trials. Even if the entity is paying him with coin, where does he buy stuff? He doesn't even eat. No reason, unless he was being manipulated. And manipulation is something that Deathslinger had to suffer for a long time. First, it was Bayshore, who treated Deathslinger very poorly, all because he was Irish. But Deathslinger was not a stupid man. In fact, he's basically a genius. He created a lot of machinery and gave the patents to Bayshore, only for him to sell them to others, so they started to copy his creations without giving him a single penny. This enraged Deathslinger a lot, so he decided to kill Bayshore, but he survived, and Caleb had to be imprisoned. Inside the same prison, he met the warden, who promised Deathslinger freedom if he could bring in new criminals, making him rich. He accepted the deal, but again, despite his brilliance and skills to fulfill his duty exactly as it was promised, the warden backstabbed Deathslinger with Bayshore, the same person that hurt him in the past. For that reason, Deathslinger decided to kill both of them, this time forever. And after killing them, Slinger had no other reason to continue killing. He completed his revenge, so for the entity, Deathslinger would be useless compared to other killers like Spirit. It was at this exact moment that the entity decided to manipulate Deathslinger into one more deal, and it is directly stated in his official lore. Deathslinger was manipulated to see the illusions of people that did him wrong in the past, and it showed him glances of the entity's realm with the hooks, which Slinger took great interest in. Out of all the killers in Dead by Daylight to this day, Deathslinger's lore was the first one where it's absolutely canon that he sees the survivors as something they are not. And for those doubting this, there is an even bigger piece of evidence that the entity is manipulating the characters visually into seeing things that are not real. Zarina Kassir, Felix, and Talbot, the man who would become the Blight later in time. Zarina was taken by the entity exactly in the same spot as Deathslinger was, and she was taken because the entity showed her the corpse of her dad on the floor, which shocked Zarina and made her vulnerable to the entity's manipulation. Felix had the same fate. The entity showed him an illusion of his father that made Felix enter willingly to the entity's realm. And the same happened with Talbot. The entity manipulated him to enter the realm with promises of seeing things he never saw before. We know that the entity can and will manipulate survivors and killers alike in order to bring them to the realm for its own benefit. And how about a killer that is being manipulated in real time, and both we as players and the survivors can see it at the same time? This is where the twins comes in. Charlotte is another killer with white eyes, but unlike the other killers like Spirit or Slinger, she has a softer white on her eyes. This could fit with this theory perfectly, as Twins is partially being manipulated by the entity. We can see Victor, and the survivors also see him too, so he is a real physical entity. However, the real Victor we know died ages ago. Unlike what most people think, we do not know if the entity can resurrect dead people, because all the killers and survivors that should have been dead were taken before they died, like Spirit, Oni, Amanda, or Bill. Victor died long ago, and the Victor we have in the game is weird. He has 3 eyes, something that was never stated anywhere in the lore, and he can be born and detach at will out of her torso cavity. For any normal person, it's clear that this is not the same Victor that was alive with her at the start, but for her, this is her brother. So the entity might be manipulating Charlotte softly into thinking that whatever this zombie entity is indeed her brother, which explains why her eyes look white and dead, because she does not need to see the rest of survivors as foes. Besides, there is no reason for her to put her brother in danger by going after these survivors. She could just simply hide in the entity's realm. But how about the other killers that have white eyes? Or killers that should have white eyes but don't? This is where things get a little bit more complicated. Let's start talking about the various problems this theory has and how we can solve them. Problem number 1. The Doctor. When you think of characters with white eyes, one of the first that will come in mind is the Doctor, and he makes zero sense in this theory. He is a sadistic person, one of the most evil characters in the cast, and he would need no manipulation at all, because he is smart, and the deal of torturing and researching humans for all eternity is something very attractive to him. But I have a counter argument to the Doctor. The white eyes that he has are not the same entity-touched eyes that the rest of the killers have. The white in his pupils is just electricity, and this is confirmed in his Surgeon of Slaughter outfit, where his eyes become even whiter because according to the head cosmetic, they are overcharged with electricity. So with this, we can completely remove the Doctor from the list of manipulated killers and from this theory completely. Problem number 2. The Hillbilly. The problem I have with Hillbilly is that it is shown that he has the same white eyes as the rest of the entity-touched killers, but for me personally, this does not sit right. In the past, Hillbilly was a tragic character that was tortured by his parents and forced to live a horrible infancy, so the community says that what he sees in the survivors are his parents, so he can kill them for eternity. But Hillbilly does not need any reason to kill, because various of his cosmetics showcase that he kills because he wants to. I might have 2 explanations for this, and the first one is something that I theorize, but you will need a tinfoil hat in order to believe this. What if originally the devs did not intend for the white eyes to convey that the entity is manipulating the killers? After all, Hillbilly and Wraith were original characters and one of the first made. Maybe the intention of them was to showcase the perk Lightborn in the design of the character, as it is said that the Hillbilly has adapted to light, and the same would apply with Shadowborn on Wraith, which allows him to have keen vision in darkness of the night. In Sekiro, the main character also has something similar to white eyes to see better in the dark, which would fit Wraith perfectly, and it also makes sense since originally Shadowborn made it so that flashlights were stronger against the killers as a downside, but I cannot confirm this theory as something right, so instead my other explanation for Hillbilly's case is very simple. He is indeed made to see his parents only so it makes him rage more, giving the entity more emotions to feed on. Problem number 3. The Plague. If we're going to talk about an entity manipulating a killer through fake visions, the Plague is the first one that comes to mind. Most people will agree that there is no reason for Plague to start mercilessly killing random survivors, and the entity could manipulate Plague instead, making her see infidels in the trials just to feed on her emotions. So why does the Plague have completely normal eyes like the majority of killers? The thing is that the Plague is one of the easiest killers to manipulate, because all the entity had to do is simply make her believe that it's one of her gods in the Babylonian pantheon. The Plague is a fanatic, and she would absolutely follow the words of her god to the letter if she believes it is the word of God on the first place, so she does not need any visual manipulation at all. Problem number 4. The artist. The final problem I have with this series is tied to one specific killer. One killer that has no reason to kill any of the survivors in the trials. That killer is the artist, because based on her lore, there is no reason for her to willingly kill anyone besides the cartel that took her and cut her own hands and tongue. The thing is that even then, she did not kill the cartel members herself, it was the entity. So for her, just like Hillbilly, I have two personal theories, and you might have to pick that tinfoil hat back up. The first theory that I have is that for the artist, she has no other choice, because if it were not for the entity, she would be dead. In fact, the entity is the only thing that keeps her alive, so maybe she does feel okay with killing survivors as long as she still has her time to paint and be alive. The other theory is the wild one. So we know that the artist has a lot of ink, and it's possible that her entire blood was replaced by entity ink, which would explain why her eyes look almost pitch black. If you take a look at most of the entity touched eyes in the game, you can see that the borders of the eyes are whiter than the insides according to the official trailer of Deathslinger. So this could explain how the eye is brownish and the pupil is fully dark, because the entity touched eyes are mixing with bloody ink. However, this is just a theory. These are, in my opinion, the only problematic killers for this theory. So in conclusion, the white eyes theory states that the entity manipulates the killers into seeing things that are not the reality in order for them to serve or in order to boost their emotions while they are killing the survivors. Trapper was tortured by the entity and he ended up serving. Plague is being manipulated into thinking that the entity is her god. The hack is too broken and hungry, so she will kill anything in her path. And for the rest of killers like Huntress, Clown, Dredge, Ghostface, Trickster, Oni, Legion or Doctor, all of them do not need any reason to kill, or they don't hold a grudge towards anyone in particular. Licensed killers are evil by themselves without the influence of the entity. So, the characters that are left are the Wraith, who sees the survivors as either his enemies or as Azaroth himself, the Hillbilly, who sees the survivors as his parents in order to boost his hatred, the Spirit, who sees the survivors as her dad in order to continue her own reoccurs and desire for revenge latent no matter how many times she kills the survivors over and over again, the Deathslinger, who sees the survivors as his past enemies and betrayers, and the Twins, who sees Victor as his true reanimated brother, despite Victor just being a physical recreation of what he once was. So, is that all the killers that are being manipulated by the entity? Is there any other killer where their design is completely covered by a mask or helmet, but inside it they also have white eyes? And why is this PNG of the nurse appearing in the middle of the video? That's because it is very possible that the nurse is another killer inflicted with the entity touched eyes. This was impossible to see for years, but for the people of my channel that have been here for long enough, you will remember an unmasking video that I made where, thanks to Dweet, we could see how Nurse's face looks completely uncovered from any cosmetics. This is her face featured on her Ashen Lady cosmetic, and just like you see, her eyes are white, just like Spirit and just like Twins. So that means that the nurse is also being manipulated by the entity to see the survivors as something they are not in reality. So possibly she sees them as the people inside the asylum. Out of all masked characters in the game, the nurse is the one that makes the most sense as to being manipulated. Ghostface is happy to kill. Pyramid Head does not need any entity manipulation. And the only killer whose face is impossible to see right now is the Knight. And trust me, he is not a good person at all. So he does not need any manipulation as well. So the fact that Nurse, the only masked character that features wide eyes, had this detail added has to mean something. So, do you believe in this theory, or do you think this is just a coincidence? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, you will enjoy this one as well. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.